welcome to this hangout with Swapan Das Gupta. I'm your host, Amit Malviya. Swapan is a noted columnist and a political commentator. He's amongst one of the handful people who have been relentlessly pursuing an alternate narrative in an otherwise left-dominated socialist setup. Welcome, Swapan Das. Uh, Over the next half hour, we'll be discussing the man of the moment, Mr. Narendra Modi, who has recently been anointed as BJP's PM designate. His rise is phenomenal, particularly at a time when India is at what could be called an inflection point. So my first question to you, Swapnanda, is what makes Narendra Modi so special?
Well, thanks, Amit, for inviting me for this hangout. What makes Narendra Modi so special? Let me approach this question in a slightly roundabout way. Let us look at the mere process of his anointment. And I think that should tell you why he's special. You know, most Indian politicians who have aspired to become Prime Minister and who actually preferred themselves as candidates for the prime ministerial position in a general election have by and large been anointed out of the party ranks. Now, in a nominal sort of way, that is precisely what happened to Narendra Modi last Friday. But the pressures working on him, on the system, to anoint him were fundamentally different. There was a relentless and considerable pressure from below. In other words, much before the political class in the BJP or the NDA had actually anointed him as the PM candidate for the NDA, he had actually been appointed to that post by a groundswell from below. So they were formalizing what actually had taken place much earlier. So that the process of his elevation itself is quite unique in post-independence history. And I think that in a sense answers some of the question which you're asking. What is so special about Narendra Modi? And I think the most unique thing about Narendra Modi is that unlike a lot of politicians, he is an inspirational leader. He is a person who commands respect, no doubt, but is a man who inspires. Now, a lot of people might say, well, that's really not the job of a politician. Perhaps that's true, because a politician is theoretically only supposed to govern, not inspire. But if you look at the context of India today, when you are drifting in a listless fashion, meandering, not really knowing where you are, and leaving a lot of your potential unfulfilled, I think to tap energies from below in the larger task of making India great. And I think that's the thing. The inspirational entity is what distinguishes Modi from the rest of the pack. And we can talk about other facets which are different. But this is something which is specifically unique to him.
Swapnanda, you made a very interesting point, which is that Narendra Modi inspires, quite unlike most other politicians. And that itself is a huge statement because given the all-round contempt for the political class, he's one man who stands out. He's somebody who's known to have opinion on issues other than social and identity-related issues. Now, if we were to look at the ideas that today define Narendra Modi, what do you think have really stood out, which have essentially led to this mass, surge in his favor?
Well, one of the features of Narendra Modi is that he means different things to different people. And I was talking to an American academic yesterday, and he was saying that, look, this is ideal for a politician if he means so many different things to different people. But let's look at, in essence, what is it that gave him that cutting edge? I think more than anything else, it's two things. One is an uncompromising stand on development. And he was entrusted with the development of Gujarat for the past 12 years. So, in a sense, what he did was very much Gujarat specific. But the manner in which he did it, with a single-mindedness, with a degree of improvisation, innovation, which has not been seen for a long time. And he thought big. Unlike people unlike politicians who are only concerned at a very modest degree of achievements, which could see them through a constituency, see them through a region, etc. This man thought big. And occasionally, he was not afraid of taking a decision which could be temporarily unpopular. I recall, and this is a personal anecdote which I can give you, during the time of the 2007 elections, at that time, there was a lot of agitation within the ranks of his own party about the prosecution of those who were guilty of power theft. And this involved about 1 lakh or 2 lakh people. It's not that they would be in prison, but they would be fined. And he wanted to cut out the incidents of power theft. So, in their manifesto, they had put forward a scheme for a general amnesty. When Modi looked at it, and I was there with him when he looked at it, he says, sorry, I don't agree. I am not agreeing to this manifesto if it has this. The point is, unless we can put some order into this public sector enterprise, which has, after a very, very long time, turned the corner, we're going to be in the same position all over again. So he was willing to take the risk. He was willing to make a short-term adjustment for the sake of a long-term interest. And this is really what really did. In other words, his horizon wasn't ever short-term. He was looking at the long term. And that's why a lot of things which he's done in Gujarat, a lot of people said that, Rewari, he made a speech talking about defense production. Do you know that in Gujarat, they've actually set up seminars, workshops, etc., addressing this issue of how to attract possibly defense production. In other words, a lot of thought has been given from the perspective of a state, of a small state, to what can be done with it. So I think it's these various moves which show that here we are talking about a leader who's willing to learn, who's constantly absorbing new ideas, who is really anxious to be at the cutting edge of the 21st century, a man who doesn't think India deserves the second best, who thinks India has the potential and is willing to be among the in the top league and is willing to go that extra mile for it. And I think that's really why a large section of the youth in particular are so attracted by this idea of Narendra Modi. Because for them, there is a certain impatience. They are not willing to take the sense of fatalism which their parents or their grandparents accepted on face value. They're restless because they said, why the hell should we be any less being Indian? And somewhere along the line, he epitomizes that raw energy, that restlessness, that desire to get to the top. And I think that's a sense in which I see Narendra Modi. A lot of people, on the other hand, may see him in some other respect. But I think that's what, in my mind, is what makes Narendra Modi special in today's political environment.
That's an interesting point, Subhanda. Let me just build on this, on particularly the economic side of his governance that you talked about. Uh, Whether it's the Agriculture Summit or it's the Vibrant Gujarat Summit, one has noticed that there is a trust on individual enterprise more than the state-driven economy, which we have all been used to. Now, he has made this departure in a significant manner at the state level. Do you think, as someone who's at the helm of affairs of the country, he will be able to break free from the shackles of the Nehruvian economic model and chart a completely new growth-led path? Is it going to be really easy for Narendra Modi, or is it going to be as easy as it was for him at the state when he moves to the center?
Well, it's a very interesting question. Obviously, this involves somewhat of a speculation. But let me, in answering that question, and since you mentioned this Vibrant Gujarat Summit, I want to talk a little bit about it and as to how exactly Narendra Bhai saw it. He didn't see it merely in terms of a place where the big industrialists come and give speeches, some of them generous certificates to him, etc. I was struck by the number of people who attended it. And at times I said, oh God, it looks a bit like a tamasha. And I asked him this question. I said, why are there so many people, some of whom are, who are sitting in on seminars on Newfoundland, on some part of Tajikistan, or something which is happening in Germany, sitting in on seminars like. He said, look, I make it a point to bus in people who are small entrepreneurs, etc., from smaller towns, non-metros, etc. Because I want them to come. I want them to get the exposure that this is what the world is. It is from that exposure that they will be able to imbibe. And he said, even if 5 people, 10 people imbibe these, they can transform their own little locality. So it is that. It's that constant willingness to allow this sense of India's energy to percolate downwards. Yes, there is a monstrous Nehruvian establishment which is coming. And in particular, there is a huge gargantuan state apparatus which we've created. You notice during the budgets, union budgets, the emphasis is always on allotment. When they say, look, we've increased the outlay on education from so-and-so 1,000 crores to so-and-so 1,000 plus crores, they thump the table. The point which is never asked is, what is the quality of your expenditure, if at all? In other words, you're talking in terms of always expanding the size of the state, the reach of the state, without talking about the efficiency of the state. And there, Narendra Bhai, I think, has made a departure. He's talking about the necessity of an audit of your performance. He has put the word efficiency into the functions of the state. It would be ridiculous, in my opinion, or it would be perhaps a bit naive to believe that India can do without the state as yet. But we can certainly do without a state which is there, which is completely inefficient, which doesn't take into account how it spends its money, the quantum of leakages, and its intrusiveness in areas where it has no business to be there. Today, one of the reasons why the interest rates are so high is because most of the money is being mopped up by the state, which leaves very little scope for industry. Manufacturing becomes uncompetitive, and in a globalized world with high interest rates, you become automatically uncompetitive. It's those issues. It's the approach I think what is very important, as what I believe will be important if we have a Modi administration at the center, is that the basic approach to Indian issues is going to be fundamentally different. After that, it really depends on what the sort of receptivity which the people can get, how there are responses from different quarters, and a bit of luck. Because if we can persist with the status quo, we are once again back to sub 5% growth level, which is not adequate for India, which does considerable injustice to the type of hopes, aspirations, and potential which this country has. So I think it's that approach which is most important as far as Modi. It is a different approach. And that's why we think it's important to, this should be encouraged and these ideas should be allowed to disseminate.
That's very interesting, Shobhinda, because what you tell us gives us hope that there is a possibility of an alternate narrative in this country, and perhaps in Mr. Modi, we will have a first non-Nehruvian prime minister in some sense. And I think competing ideas is anytime a good thing for a democracy. So great thought, and perhaps it'll help the economy in a big way.
Yeah, but I want to add one thing, that these ideas are not unchallenged. And I think what is important, what a lot of people see as an election campaign, is not slogan shouting, it's also a battle of ideas. And I think it's that battle of ideas which has got to be taken in. Because you are actually fortunate in having a politician who believes in an alternative narrative. There are a lot of people who say, look, we don't like Modi's idea of India. My reply to that is, there is no one single idea of India. And Modi has a different idea of India from the consensus which you have. What binds us together is a common faith in the democratic structure of the Constitution. But the Constitution does not necessarily say that you must have a gargantuan state. We needlessly, during the emergency, injected the term socialism into one of the directive principles of state, as one in the preamble of the Constitution. It wasn't there before the emergency, and it means precious little. So, yes, let us make this election issue a battle of ideas, because it's only when people are convinced that India has to really strike out on an alternative path that it becomes possible.
No, absolutely. It's a great point there. Let me ask you the more controversial questions. The thing about Mr. Modi is that everybody in Lutyens' Delhi seems to oppose him, and everybody outside of Delhi wants him there. Is his status as an outsider to the Delhi establishment build a certain aura around him and gets a certain amount of freshness to his candidature?
Yeah, in the United States they call it going outside the beltway, being from outside the beltway. They're an outsider to this. To a large extent, the political establishment doesn't consist merely of those who are MPs, who at present the incumbents are naturally frightened of the prospect of them not getting re-elected. That's understandable. Every MP wants to get re-elected. But I think along with the elected representatives of the people and the permanent bureaucracy, there exists a large body which is called the Darbar, which is really the baggage. And those are the people who are petrified, who have held certain powers, who have dominated certain centers. Intellectual capital, for example, is completely vested in the hands of the left liberal. Economic planning, for example, is totally vested in their hands. there has been a small set of people who have governed India with the same ideas which have been going on for a long time. And they are worried about it. And Modi brings up a different alternative approach, which is why they would like to decry him. They decry him socially. They decry him for the fact that he's not one of us. They decry him for the fact that he's not a familiar figure in the Delhi landscape. They decry him for the fact that he talks so passionately at present about his Gujarati identity, his Gujarati roots. And they decry him because he has offended some of the unwritten rules of politics, which means that however much you nominally disagree, you end up agreeing on the same thing. So it's that fundamental challenge. You know, there are two other politicians in recent times who actually broke that consensus. You know, the word consensus sounds great, but you know, consensus is like a straitjacket. It also prevents you from moving in different directions. Margaret Thatcher broke that straitjacket. She hated it. She was the one who said, I don't believe in the consensus because this consensus has got us nowhere. Ronald Reagan, who was parodied and mocked by most of the liberal intellectual establishment of the United States, said, I do not believe that this sort of a status quo can continue. Now, Reagan was a great communicator, so he could sort of wow people. Thatcher wasn't that effective a communicator, but she was far stronger in the realm of ideas. But you need a jolt. You need someone from outside the system to break, to shake it up, to make people begin to question some of the fundamentals which we've accepted as the holy gospel so far. It's not the holy gospel. It's something which was implanted in there. Why should the Planning Commission be so important? Is there any reason why it should be? It's a fundamental question. Why should India's foreign policy not be dictated by absolutely single-minded national interests? Instead of going into the shibboleths of non-alignment, you know, the legacy of this, that, and the other, family contacts, etc. So these, the possibility that such questions will be raised is what offends, which petrifies the Delhi establishment. And that's why there is a great deal of fear. You can only realize the panic. You know, Narendra Modi has been drawing great crowds outside Gujarat for some time now. But it was only after the Rewari meeting, because Rewari is less than 100 kilometers from Lutyens, Delhi, that somehow this whole reality that there is a Modi euphoria building up in a place where the BJP is not itself very strong, that it really wasn't accompanied or preceded by any phenomenal degree of mobilization and expenditure of money, that it was a spontaneous mobilization. That reality has hit home, and you're going to see, in my view, some people changing their tune very, very fast, because, you know, at the end of the day, some people, the Delhi establishment is also great survivors. You know, they just want to inveigle their way into whichever dispensation. But their coziness certainly has been challenged.
So let me ask you this. Is the disdain for Mr. Modi's candidature within the select elite class is more because he comes with a different set of ideas, or is it more of a class bias? That here is a man who comes from a certain humble origin, he has the audacity to challenge them and possibly unseat them. Which one do you think dominates this loathing for Mr. Modi more?
I think it's a combination of both. You know, there was a feeling that the BJP, it's often been caricatured, the BJP, oh, the party of the upper Brahmins. The BJP, which is basically an upper class party. But here, you have someone from what I believe is an MBC caste, most backward caste, articulating ideas which were mocked in the past as ideas which are the privilege of the rich. India, you have a curious paradox. You have those who have inherited political power, those who have never lived their life in any place but a government-sponsored Lutyens bungalow, who don't own their own property, who've never paid rent. They are the biggest champions of the poor. It's this curious paradox which they, and they are offended by two things. That this man is bringing out ideas of energy, enterprise, initiative, and at the same time, his social background is such that you can't caricature him and say, oh, he's not another sort of Romney who could be caricatured by Barack Obama as a man who just rolled in money to begin with, was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. You can't do that. The irony, then I'd say that this is it. Those who are talking most about how they are empowering the poor are those who have a profound sense of entitlement, who believe that Lutyens Delhi was created by the British, never to use themselves, but to bequeath to this class. And that fear is there. So it's both at the level of the class, a disdain, a social contempt, which you often find in the left liberal media, and the refusal to accept that ideas, new ideas, can come from a person whose social background is so dissimilar to yours. So that's why I'm saying it's both a class and an ideological conflict.
Great. I think we as a nation should realize that, you know, the rise of a man like Mr. Modi from his humble origins to being the probable prime ministerial candidate itself is a celebration of democracy. And that's what makes us so special and different. Before we move, you know, towards a discussion with our group of people who have joined us, let me ask you this, and this is one of the criticisms again, that, you know, as Chief Minister of a state, Mr. Modi has no exposure of, say, foreign policy, right? Or for that matter, you know, he hasn't undertaken reforms at a national level. Do you think it is really an impediment, or how do you think, you know, he's going to take on this challenge and move ahead, you know, if he were to be entrusted with the top job?
I mean, that's like saying that India should not have got independence because the leaders who came into power immediately at the independence didn't have exposure to governance, only had exposure to mass agitations, had spent most of their lives in prison. It's not like that at all. The point is, politics, the art of governance, is not something you acquire through an MBA degree or something similar. Neither is it something which is often bequeathed from one generation to another through inheritance. It comes partly out of your ability to carry a lot of people, to show that you have leadership abilities, to be able to improvise, to be able to innovate, to be able to grasp what's there. Now, Narendra Modi, when he became Chief Minister of Gujarat, had never been an MLA, had never been a corporator, and yet, within 12 years, he grasped and did more than just be an ordinary chief minister. His chief minister was good enough for him to be considered now a possible prime minister. So to say that you must necessarily always be in a position where you have to be born into a political family or you have to have sustained exposure, etc., I think is a very partial view of things. People can either they have it or they don't. And what is the bureaucracy for? What are the expertise of things? You're not asking for a one-man administration. You have all the necessary expertise and talent available at your disposal of the whole country, cutting across party lines. We're not talking about one man. It's the ability of the manager to be able to harness all these things. And that's something which I've seen in Narendra Modi. I've often been asked, especially by Western diplomats who are completely curious and unfamiliar with the man, and say, who influences Modi? Tell us the 4 or 5 people whose word he really listens to. And I said, look, he actually listens to himself. But he takes the input of a hell of a lot of people. He might just, play 10 minutes or 15 minutes of this Google Hangout, get 2 ideas of some of the possible questions which come out. That's an interesting idea, he might feel, and it will absorb it. So a man who's open to ideas is really a man, I think, who has the ability to lead. And the chief ministership of a state like Gujarat is almost like the prime ministership of a European country in terms of size, if you really look at it.
Absolutely. So let me ask you one last question. It might sound cliche, but we live in a world full of cliches. What would be the idea of India under Narendra Modi as Prime Minister? And I ask this question because I often see you slug it out on television debates. So if you can define it, what would that be?
I'm very wary of this idea that India should necessarily always be defined along certain codified bases. There are many facets of India, and I think one of the great civilizational things which we digest about India is its openness, is its ability to absorb a lot of different cross currents. But where we have lacked in this terms of absorbing everything is sometimes we've lost our sense of direction. And I think there are certain features of an idea of India which I have as far as Mr. Modi is concerned. But they are by no means the only ideas. I believe that the restoration of initiative, that the downgrading, that putting the state at a slightly different key altogether, instead of making it having it as the commanding heights of the economy. The idea of robust patriotic values in a globalized world are important. But beyond that, I always say, why should there be only one idea of India? I think what is necessary is that for the moment, we should take a purposeful direction of India rather than an idea of India to be the main thing. If the people say, and you're quite right in talking about people who've made this entire issue of the idea of India, and they say Modi doesn't believe in this, Modi doesn't believe in this. Where they've come to this conclusion, I do not know. But they want to be fixated on identity politics. They want to be fixated on the idea of a certain glorification of poverty, which is one of the more negative legacies of the Mahatma and people like Rabindranath Tagore. They do not see the necessity why India should aspire to the top of the pile in terms of the global order. These are issues which offend them because they would rather have this rather romantic and a passive view of India. And I feel that we need to go beyond that. It's not a question that we have, which has become a cliche, 5,000 years of India civilization, India, the land of the Mahatma, the India, the land of Buddha, the India, the land of so-and-so, so-and-so. That's fine. But what is the direction of this India? If there is a spiritual entity called India, it cannot be static. And the idea of India which the opponents of are static. I think an alternative vision, we can see the broad contours of an alternative vision. But I think we can see broadly the scaffolding in place. But the bricks and mortars are there yet to be actually put in place. So I would myself say that there has to be a certain open-endedness about this question.
Great. Thank you, Swapanda. We will now take questions from some of our panelists. First to go, Sean from Goa.
Hi.
Sean, can you ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Amit. My question is on the current economic scenario in this country. One of the biggest challenges facing the nation today is the collapsing economy.
I beg your pardon, could you repeat that again?
One of the biggest challenges facing the nation today is the collapsing economy.
Yeah.
Reviving the economy will need hard decisions, which means moving away from mindless populism. Do you think Mr. Modi will be able to do it, being a first-time Prime Minister?
Any answer is bound to be merely a hypothesis because, we haven't experienced it. But let me look at it this way. There are certain ideas we have. And I'm glad you raised this question of populism. What is the main two criticisms which are leveled against two programs? One is this Right to Food program, and one is the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. In terms of the National Rural Guarantee Act, what we need is a Narendra 2, by which we move away from dual distribution to both skill creation and asset building, for which people will be paid. And they don't have to worry about that so much. The second issue is the one on the on the question of the right to food. Now, this is primarily a state subject. You cannot have programs in India which has a one-size-fits-all. What is relevant to Goa is certainly not relevant to Punjab. You cannot try and therefore say that you must have one model to fit all. In other words, what we need in India today is a greater thrust on federalism, whereby decision making becomes decentralized and chief ministers are empowered to take decisions which are of direct benefit to their own state. Because the way in which that state wants to move may be very different from the way another state wants to move. And that amount of diversity, keeping in mind the larger Indian framework of unity, is something which can be accommodated. Now, take for instance this economic crisis. One of the biggest problems in this one of the biggest contributors of this economic crisis is the fact that our macro economy has been horribly mismanaged. Government is spending far more than it is earning. If you do that, you'll get into a debt trap at an individual level. If the government does it at a macro level, it too will get into a muddle, which it has got into. You will get into a situation where your sovereign ratings are being questioned, where your fiscal deficit is getting higher, you're not exporting enough because all the money is, because your industry is getting increasingly uncompetitive, because your own industrialists don't feel that you are in a position that the environment of India is conducive to investment. We have, in the past few years, gone into a novel situation. We are becoming a net exporter of capital. Why? Because obviously the industrialists here feel, the entrepreneurs here said that, look, it's better to invest somewhere else. We are not utilizing our raw material in way. Being from Goa, you know exactly what the mining disaster has created. Why? Because of cronyism. We know that there's been power shortages in this country, including collapse of the national grid because of coal shortages. And at the same time, we have coal in abundance, which is not being mined because, again, cronyism and corruption has prevented that. So we have created our own, lot of the problems which we have created are self-made, man-made, and government-made. And if those, at least a few of those, if you have a short-term view of at least in the first 1.5 years, attend to just these problems, you are going to certainly create an environment whereby people will have a restoration of faith in the ability of India to once again live up to its potential. There's no good in saying that your fundamentals are strong. Of course, we know our fundamentals are strong. There's no good saying that, oh, you have great potential. I mean, what good is a potential if you don't fulfill it by performance? So there are lots which can be done at an immediate level, which require a certain coherence in terms of your approach. And that coherence, unfortunately, is lacking as far as this government is concerned. And that presents anyone coming in with both a challenge and a supreme opportunity of correcting a lot of things.
Great. Thank you, Sean. I'll now request Biplab Debaram to ask the question. He's from Tripura.
Yeah, hi Biplab, please go on.
Biplab, we can't hear you. Biplab, you are on mute possibly.
Now you can hear me?
Okay, we'll come back to, yes.
I can hear you now.
You can hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Pranam Dada, ami Biplab Agartalar, living in Mumbai. And see, I know in the grand scheme of things, for Narendra Modi ji, particular community or particular region doesn't matter. But I will ask from the perspective of Northeast. What is there for Northeast? I mean, how Narendra Modi ji would be different from other Delhi rulers, UPA government, and so. What is and how northeastern people, how they should see Narendra Modi ji? Because for them it's whatever development or whatever is happening, it's basically because of the local government, state government. For them, maybe I am generalizing a little bit. It's so far the Delhi leadership has been a little bit patronizing. They just come during the election, talk big, and at the end of the day we are where we are. So two things in the grand scheme of things where Northeast fit, and how does Northeastern people should see Narendra Modi? That's it.
Yes, I think there are two fundamental issues as far as the Northeast is concerned. One is the economic issue, and one is an emotional issue. And I think both have got to be addressed simultaneously. The economic issue is compounded by two or three different things. One is a problem of communication. Tripura is unable to use its most natural land route, which has to be through Bangladesh.
Yes, you are
Because
right.
there is no transit. As a
Yes.
result, Tripura gets into
Yes.
a muddle.
Yeah.
It cannot live up to its potential.
Yes.
Arunachal has a problem because for a very, very silly military doctrine, we have not built infrastructure in that.
Yes.
Mizoram has a problem. Mizoram has less of a problem today than it had earlier. But certainly Manipur has a problem whereby it has become attractive to be professional insurgents.
Yes. You're very. Yes.
Money is actually being paid by the government to create insurgency. Yeah, can you hear me now? Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry. Money is being put in by the government to create insurgency.
Yes. Yes. You are right.
Now, it requires twofold. One is if a greater degree of federalism is injected into the system, it leads to a greater level of accountability as far as people are concerned, where politicians can actually be asked questions. They don't have to really bother about who is in power in Delhi. The main job of a lot of northeastern politicians has been to keep good equations with whoever is in power in Delhi, which is why you often see, in some parts like Arunachal, you see governments changing en masse from one party to another if there's a shift in the power equations in Delhi.
Yes.
That has to stop somewhere. Greater degree, I think Sikkim, in that sense, has done far better.
Yes.
Because Sikkim is single-mindedly for you can say it's a one-party government. I think there's only one member of the opposition in the legislature. But Sikkim has done far better. But communication has been a big problem in terms of not being able to realize the potential. So a full-fledged communication. Today, this issue of Bangladesh and India's relation with Bangladesh should have been a matter of even a greater priority than our relationship with Pakistan.
Yes, I totally agree. Fully agree. Yeah.
But it hasn't. For this very simple reason, because it's some people think their entire life has to be built on creating biradri and aman ki asha with Pakistan, where your own economic interest you haven't done. And secondly, there is this emotional issue. And I think we've seen that in the indifferent treatment and the discriminatory treatment which is being meted out to a large number of northeastern people in either Delhi, Bombay, etc. Now today we recognize one thing, that education is probably the greatest avenue in which the Northeast can move ahead. That's one of their great strong points. And if those opportunities are somehow stymied by extraneous issues like discriminatory treatment, etc., then it creates a problem. So you've got to be very firm about these things. The amount of time we've talked about special minorityism, etc. Even a quarter of that to the emotional needs of people in the Northeast, you would have been better off. But I think next time Modi ji comes to a Google Hangout or something, I suggest you also ask him this question.
Yes.
One of my suggestions to him was that you should start, when you formally start your election campaign, start it from Arunachal because the sun rises in the first rays of the sun in India are seen in Arunachal.
Just to add on, I will just to add on, Dada, I understand. It's not that central government has not been doing much. They have done a lot. I have to appreciate that fact. I have to admit that. Despite the whatever discrimination one faces in the northern part of the country, not so much in western, actually, not very much. But Dada, from practical point of view, just from practical point of view, instead of other northeastern states, small northeastern state, at least Modi ji can focus on Assam. And from that perspective, I mean, it's not very difficult. Like you are suggesting, Modi should start from Arunachal, Mizoram. They don't have much. They don't have many seats. But from Assam they can start, and from there it can spread out in other northeastern parts.
I understand. You're talking about an electoral issue. You're talking about an electoral issue.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying from practical.
That is a matter of electoral strategy. I am not in a position to advise. But you're quite right. I think Assam
Yes.
is likely to give Narendra Modi a considerable chunk of votes in the coming election.
Sir, why I'm saying is Assam and development of Assam in West Bengal is critical for development of other northeastern states. If you see geographical and in every way. Anyway, thanks, Dada.
Thanks so much. Thanks. I'll request Jyoti ma'am to come in. She's an educationist from Ahmedabad to ask the question, please.
Namaste, Sapandas ji. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Just I would like to ask that from point of view Prime Minister Narendra Modi, what does it mean for India? As you know that he is equally popular among women. So what does it mean for women from women empowerment point of view as well as women education point of view?
You see, I think what really has to be seen in terms of what Narendra Modi means for the rest of India is you have to see what are the approaches he has taken in Gujarat. Everyone says Gujarat is not India, we know that, that's true. But what is the approach? That defines a lot of it. And one of the approaches is empowerment, economic empowerment, and personal development. Three issues which have been very much a part of that. Now, as far as women's empowerment in India is concerned, I think it's a no-brainer to say that today, in terms of education at least, the notion of gender discrimination is an archaic idea. It does not. It exists in parts of India, but it has to be seriously looked at. So, a political person who has an inspirational quotient in him has to also combine, to some extent, the role of a social reformer. This is very important in my view. You know, in his own way, we might criticize him for different things. Jawaharlal Nehru realized this. A lot of legislation, in terms of pure social legislation, was done not so much because it brought any economic returns, not so much because it brought any electoral returns, but because it was necessary, because to have a more just and fair India, you needed it. I think, therefore, Modi ji at this time will have to wear two hats. One is that of a person who is a politician, and secondly, a person who is also a reformer. I recall a particular speech which someone told me, and since you're from Gujarat, you'll understand. He made a speech where he said that I think the problem with Gujaratis is that we have been worshipping Lakshmi for too long and not Saraswati adequately. I think that tells you something. And I think it's that combination of Lakshmi and Saraswati which really is the issue where women are concerned.
Yeah, thank you so much. We'll just take two last questions as we are drawing close to the event. Anupam from Banaras, he has a question. Anupam, go ahead. Anupam? Okay, we'll come back to Anupam. Rangesh? Rangesh from Trichy, can you ask your question?
Thanks, Amit. Good evening, Mr. Supandas Gupta. I'm Rangesh from Trichy, and I work as a business consultant in Mumbai. You spoke about the the visceral hatred and contempt that the Delhi elite has for Modi and the idea or whatever he represents. Going forward, if he becomes the prime minister, and I hope he does become the prime minister, he needs to navigate through the same system. For instance, to just give you one example of finding cooperation, say in Rajya Sabha, to navigate its legislations. And I don't see the BJP having, a workable majority in the Rajya Sabha in the 5 years that Modi will be the prime minister. What do you think he will do differently to navigate the parliament and also to, navigate through the system which is so stacked up against him?
I think it's a very interesting point, and I think it's a point which needs to be stressed. Firstly, I believe that one of the first things he has to do is he has to redefine center-state relations, which means that India must become more federal, that more decisions must be taken by the states, with the only caveat that they should be transparent and with a premium on efficiency. Rajya Sabha, yes, you may say legislation, but in India today the issue is not legislation. We have too much of legislation. The point is we need actually more executive action. It's not really new legislation which is wanted. It's executive action. It's more sorry, I'm just having a little problem with the battery. It's more executive action which is called for, but it's I think it's difficult to foresee exactly how it's going to shape up. But yes, it is an issue which is going to be something which is worth thinking about.
Thanks, Mr. Rajgupta. Thanks for it.
Do we have Anupam back in the call? Okay, let me just ask the final question that Anupam had for you. He's from Banaras and he wants to know how does Narendra Modi's position as the BJP's prime ministerial candidate is going to change the dynamics in Uttar Pradesh?
Well, it's quite interesting. The last week there's been a theory which has been floated that the main reason why Modi has suddenly become a buzzword in Uttar Pradesh is because of the Muzaffarpur riots. I just want to draw your attention to an opinion poll which was done 2.5 months ago by CNN IBN along with CSDS, which is Center for Studies in Developing Societies. One of the most reputed ones which they've done, which in the past used to involve people like Mr. Yogendra Yadav, etc. It's an academic research. And in that research, 2.5 months ago, they suggested that BJP would get something like 35 plus seats in Uttar Pradesh. So the seeds of a yearning for Modi were already there. It has nothing to do with Muzaffarpur riots. Why did that seed fail? Because I think Uttar Pradesh, more than anywhere else, also recognizes the tremendous amount of stagnation which has happened. Uttar Pradesh recognizes the phenomenal damage which reckless identity politics has done. The division of UP into, so one part dominated by Muslims, one part dominated by Yadavs, one part dominated by God knows who. This is really what has been an exasperation with this, that you parcelized localities and created petty fiefdoms and put an end to all hope of UP everything. So UP has once again, is apart from a chunk in Western UP, has reverted to, in say, a place like Banaras. It's basically becoming a place of religious tourism and a money order economy. And the best thing people can do is either get out. In Azamgarh and parts like that, they go out and go to the Gulf. In other parts, they go anywhere else. In Bombay and Delhi and other places. So it's become a money order economy. So frustration with that and a belief, perhaps a very, it's a belief which, it's very difficult to define as to how it came about. The belief that Modi somehow is a magician. For a politician, that's a great thing. But there has, no doubt, and I think I'll stick my neck out by saying the last time we saw such a belief in someone who will, with a sort of a magic wand, change things or bring in a new culture. Well, we saw it during the Independence Day when Gandhiji became different things to different people all over Uttar Pradesh, among a peasantry which had never been politicized. But of course, now with 60 years of intense politicization, we are seeing a very different form of thing. So it's a opposition to stagnation, and really a belief that this man might actually be able to change things. Now, I think what is really fascinating about it is that there are dizzying expectations of what Narendra Modi can bring. People have reposed a lot of emotional capital in this man. Particularly, I've seen it in young people in the social media, etc. He has no choice but to live up to it. And therefore, if there is one message I would like to give him on his 63rd birthday, apart from saying happy birthday, is that, look, there's just too much faith people have put in you. You can't let them down. They won't let you down in terms of the elections. You can't let them down after the election.
Supanda, with those words, I think we should draw this program to a close. There are a lot of questions and we could go on for a couple of hours, but we have to be mindful of time. So
Yes.
thank you for making the time today to be with us, and thank you to all my guests for being there and asking their questions. We value your participation. Thank you so much. Thank you for participating.
Thank you, Amit. Thank you, Sapanji.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Sapna.
everyone.
Thanks, Ahmed.
I'm really enjoying it.
Thanks, Ravi.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.